Move into this astonishing new chapter in post-truth or Brexit politics. James is in Islington. James, what would you like to say?
Good afternoon, James. I must say I'm a regular listener to yourself and your colleagues as well. What I would say is, in regards to what you've been saying earlier on, I see obviously you and one of the previous callers have gone on about Trump being a racist. Now, I think that it's a bit far-fetched. He obviously has come out with things that are very stupid to say. However, what I will say in regards to that is, in regards to the ethnic minority employment rate in America, it's at a record low now. So,
yeah, and mate, the racism line is about telling people who were born in America to go back where they came from. So let's just park that and move on.
I appreciate what you're saying. That. In regards to actually the Trump and Farage interview last night,
yes.
I did listen to that, and I was quite impressed with what he had to say. Admittedly, obviously,
but you already like him, and you don't think he's a racist.
Well, I don't think so. I'll say racist a bit far-fetched. So maybe he's come out with idiotic comments. I'd say
but telling people who were born in America to go back where they came from isn't idiotic or far-fetched, my friend. It's racist.
No, it's down to interpretation at the end of the day.
No, it really isn't.
Obviously, we obviously disagree on this issue. However, the point I was going to call to make is... Let me
guess what the point you were going to make was.
Okay.
I think it was really bad for Jeremy Corbyn that Donald Trump criticised him, and good for Boris Johnson that he praised him.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. I personally do think that is the reason. The best,
Go on, let me ask you why.
Analogy. Well, the reason I think that is purely I live in Islington, which is a very Remain and obviously Jeremy Corbyn.
Right, mate, I'm going to have to wait. I'm going to have to wait for the biography to find out more details. Why do you think it was bad for Jeremy Corbyn to be criticised by Donald Trump?
Well, the US is our biggest ally. There's no denying that. With the US,
the US was our biggest ally when Barack Obama told us not to do Brexit. Did you applaud him?
Well, look, obviously not. But however,
why obviously?
With Trump,
why obviously not?
Coming out, he's promoting a free trade deal.
Why obviously not?
Well, because personally, I've supported Brexit.
So it's got nothing to do with America's status or its relationship with us, and everything to do with whether or not Donald Trump says something you agree with. But anyway, let's just focus on the central question. I'll remind you what it is. Why do you think it's bad for Corbyn to be criticised by Donald Trump?
I personally think it's bad for Corbyn, purely for the fact is that Trump's come out, he said he wants a free trade deal with the United Kingdom, and he has obviously said that with Boris's deal there may be limitations to how far...
Yes, but why is any of this bad for Corbyn?
Well, it's bad for Corbyn because Corbyn sat on the fence throughout the entire Brexit process, and he is.
But why does Donald Trump criticising Corbyn do damage to Corbyn?
Well, because a lot of people, especially, well, maybe not in London, but when you leave London, people aren't that keen on Corbyn. Obviously, he's got a lot of...
Yeah, but that's not an answer to the question I asked, is it? You're telling me about people who already don't like Corbyn. Why would being criticised by Donald Trump be bad for Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, it would be bad for Jeremy Corbyn because a lot of people see
James?
America's our largest ally, and if the leader of the United States is openly saying that Corbyn would be bad...
But the leader of the United States openly said that Brexit was bad, and it didn't change your mind about anything, did it?
It didn't.
So let's go back to the question that you've rung in to answer for the seventh time of asking. Why would being criticised by Donald Trump last night be bad news for Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, because anyone who wants Brexit to succeed, anyone who wants
Brexit to succeed is not going to have been planning to vote for Jeremy Corbyn, are they? So let's try for the eighth time.
Not necessarily. Why? They may well have. You've got the Labour leave areas in the north. They could well be voting for Labour. And there's a lot of places where you could put a Labour vote on a donkey and they would vote for Labour.
It's like we're having a sort of word salad. Listen, I'm not going to embarrass you by asking you 11 times, but I will ask you once more. In terms of people who had a position on Jeremy Corbyn at 5 o'clock yesterday and then heard Donald Trump criticise Jeremy Corbyn, and you believe that might have made them look more negatively at Jeremy Corbyn. Just explain your thinking to me. How would that have happened?
Because he's promoting the free trade deal with the United Kingdom. Now, anyone who wants Brexit to succeed or wants to move on...
I just can't do this anymore. Last chance, all right? Why is it bad for Corbyn? Because he criticised Johnson as well, James. I don't know if you missed that bit.
I know.
Yeah, good. So why is it good for Johnson and bad for Corbyn?
Well, because... There's a number of reasons for it.
Well, just one. I'd kill for one at the moment, mate.
Well, at the end of the day, Jeremy Corbyn could potentially become Prime Minister. Now,
Well
we want a
spotted.
good working relationship with our closest
But he
allies.
criticised Johnson's deal as well. He criticised Johnson's deal as well. So how is that good for Johnson?
He said Johnson is a great guy on numerous occasions.
Yes, but he criticised the withdrawal agreement that the whole election was called about. So how can he be good for Johnson and bad for Corbyn?
Well, because he's promoting a free trade agreement. He says he wants a free trade agreement with the
He said he
United
didn't
States.
want Johnson. So how is it good for Johnson for Donald Trump to say, I don't want the thing that you can offer
But
me?
he didn't say anything. He didn't say it's not.
I've done my bit, honestly. It's not a charity, it's a radio programme. It's coming up to 12 minutes after 12. You stay safe, James, at the end of the day. Sean's in Aberafon.
Aberafon. Hello, James.
Aberafon. How are you, Sean? What's on your mind?
I'm good, thanks. Right, for weeks now, this whole Brexit pact thing has been bugging me because I'm a maths person. I'm a numbers person. And if I'm understanding correctly, what Farage is asking about this is that
Johnson.
the Brexit party stands... no, Farage is asking...
Yeah, Johnson, not Boris. Sorry, it's just me. It's just one of my little pet things, all right? And I'm a bit late to the party, but we call him Johnson or Boris Johnson. We don't call him Boris. He's not Beyonce. Carry on.
Fair enough. I'll probably make the same mistake again.
Well, I won't jump on you again. I'm being annoying. Carry on.
Okay, anyway, so is Nigel Farage expecting the Prime Minister to stand candidates down in certain seats so that the Brexit party can take them? Because mathematically this doesn't add up. I'll give you an example. Barnsley East. There's a Labour majority, but there's 11,000 voters for the Conservative Party in Barnsley East.
Right.
So is Boris Johnson just going to donate those 11,000 voters over to Nigel Farage? And then are they naturally going to go over? Some of them going to abstain? Or some of them going to move back to Labour? Are they going
This is what would happen if Conservatives stood down in these constituencies.
Yes.
No, I'm with you. So I don't see the numbers either. Unless, I mean, who does it deliver victory to? Unless he thinks he's going to win them himself, or the Brexit party.
I tried crunching these numbers because you still have to reconcile back to that Leave vote. And the problem you've got is, if you stand both parties, you split the Leave vote, but it's impossible for the Conservative Party to just donate these voters over, because that's just one seat. If you multiply that over 100 seats, that's 1 million votes. That's 4 percentage points in the polls.
It's just not feasible.
Why the Conservatives might be reluctant now?
Well, exactly.
Exactly.
It'd be like, okay, try this for size then, because you're a clever fella, clearly, and I'm always slightly intimidated by people who are good at maths. So here's some words. Ready?
Okay, I'll try my best.
Alternative view on Farage. He knows that if the Tories win the election and get us out with this deal, then a large portion of his supporters will be lost and he'll no longer be relevant. If he does stand and splits that vote, then the likelihood of Labour winning goes up. We have a second referendum and likely remain. After that, there will inevitably be no shortage of angry Brexiters who can rally behind him again against Labour and against the Tories for not delivering and still against Europe for being those terrible baddies, and that will give him a platform to continue the Brexit party into the next general election, plus he can keep his wage as a member of the European Parliament.
Plus, on top of that, Brexit will become this mystical thing. So
once again, the unicorn is resurrected.
Yeah, we've had this crash over here or this recession over there. Oh, my God, this would never have happened if we had Brexited.
Exactly that.
Now, the calculation on that as well is that if Labour get in and they have that second referendum, if they vote out on that second referendum, then that's the first step in the untangling process, which is the hardest part of this entire issue.
Which is why of all of the misnomers and all of the empty slogans and all of the dangerously meaningless little sound bites, clean break Brexit is by far the worst, because there's no such thing.
But I've also worked for charities, so I recognise what I call firefighting as well, which is dealing with the problems. You're dealing with one problem after another problem after another problem, and you're not stepping back and thinking about things. That's where I suspect the Tories are, whereas Farage is on the sidelines watching it all.
Always a heckler. Did you think I mean, we'll never know, will we? But I wonder if he just... I still think that there could be a seat in a House of Lords in it. I mean, would he be that base and cynical? I don't know. Sean, lovely call. Angela's been in touch, says, I haven't voted for years, James, but the American president's condemnation of Jeremy Corbyn has instigated me to vote for him. I will also be attending the booth with my 2 adult daughters who will now also be voting for Corbyn. Well, I hope you'll allow them to exercise their own democratic choices there, Angela, rather than frog marching them down to the polling booth and instructing them on how to vote. I'm only teasing. It's 12:16. Who's the oldest person listening to this who's utterly delighted by emojis on the new Apple phone? I just think they're the greatest thing. I'm nearly 48. I digress slightly. 12:19. I just sent one to the boss. That's why. Sometimes they speak louder than words. 12:20 is the time. We are discussing this offer that Nigel Farage has made to Boris Johnson. I thought Theo was on characteristically good form, and he sort of described it as a promise and a threat. An offer and a threat, an offer and a warning. So drop the deal upon which you called an election. We can agree on that, can't we? You know, my quest to find things upon which everyone can agree, and then move on from there to the areas where we can have a heated debate. But the bottom line being, this election is all about the withdrawal agreement. He said he had to call an election because he couldn't get it through Parliament without levels of scrutiny that he wasn't prepared to offer. So the election is about the withdrawal agreement, and Nigel Farage has wandered into the room and said, unless you drop the withdrawal agreement that is the reason why we're having an election, then I will put hundreds of candidates. Apparently, even the people that weren't selected as candidates paid £100 to be considered. I make of that what you will. Then we will put people up in every constituency. And that, I think, would massively increase the chance. Well, I don't know if it would. I wonder if he's overplaying his own hand. I wonder if he's recognised that perhaps his flush is already busted. I don't know. Will there be? Because our mathematician caller a moment ago certainly contended that there aren't enough numbers there to make the difference that he seems to be claiming he could make. I don't know, actually. You can stick a microphone in a pub somewhere in the north of England and find some Herbert who says, I've voted Labour all my life, but I'll be voting for the Brexit Party now. But you could find someone who still thinks the moon is made of cheese. If you stuck a microphone in a different pub. Ask people why they think what they think, and 99% of vox pops fall apart faster than you can say cheap suit. But what else is going on? You know how I find it quite enlivening to be confused. I like being confused, as long as it's temporary. I've got a funny feeling that until something else happens, this one won't be temporary. What's he up to? The old rascal. 22 after 12 is the time. Shyla is in Sittingbourne. Shyla, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, you were discussing how Trump, I suppose, has harmed Jeremy Corbyn,
yes.
And
or has he?
I suppose in the same way, Nigel Farage. I think what's happened is the election has been turned into only one issue, as you said earlier, only a Brexit issue. And by keeping it that way, you're sort of excusing the Conservative government of their failings over the last 10 years, their failings on social welfare, healthcare, police, all the failings they've made. It keeps that out of the press, and all it keeps in is Brexit. And that way...
Just for one weekend, though, probably not even a weekend, just for today.
Well, no, but not for today. I think it will continue. It will be, if you want Brexit, it doesn't matter how badly we've done and what our track record is. You have to vote for us because Labour and Liberals won't give it to you.
Yeah, but how does this help then? Because he said that the Brexit Johnson's going to give to you isn't a good one.
But the point is he's going to give one. He's going to give a Brexit. So it's
but then Farage is there saying, no, he isn't. This is rubbish. This isn't even proper Brexit. How is this beneficial?
Because it keeps the debate away from the Conservative track record and their failings as in government.
I think you're reaching a bit here, Shyla. I mean, the other element of the interview was the NHS, of course.
Yeah, no, it was just in response to how you said how
single simple question. Yeah, well, I disagree with you for the record, but it doesn't mean I'm right and you're wrong. It's perfectly possible I'm wrong and you're right.
And unless the debate moves on to the wider things that everyone's concerned about, you know, that...
But it already did. I mean, Corbyn's speech yesterday, whether you love him or loathe him, was a neat bit of politicking. And the stuff about billionaires and tax avoidance and nurses and the NHS and the public sector. I mean, yesterday, my start for 10 was the very astute observation that this election on day one of the campaigning seemed to be about who you could trust to undo 10 years of Tory rule, the Tories or the Labour Party. There was no mention of Brexit. So I appreciate Brexit's front and centre again, but I just don't see how you think it's front and centre in a way that's going to make Downing Street delighted.
No, I think in the way the conversation went with Trump, not overall, but sort of the question was about benefited Farage, how Trump benefited Johnson compared to Jeremy Corbyn. I don't think an endorsement from Trump is necessarily a good thing for anyone. You know, it's not that I think he's particularly popular amongst everyone in the UK.
That's the mystery today. Finding someone. I don't know. I mean, the facts support your position. It just doesn't necessarily enthuse me. I don't think that having it now, Brexit 1 versus Brexit 2, is good for Johnson. I think it's bad for him. But it's one of those days, as I say, I like being confused. It's possible I'm still missing something. Thank you, Shyla. Philip is in Morden. Philip, what would you like to say?
Oh, yeah, James.
Hello, mate.
First of all, I've been listening to you for, oh, my God, donkey's years.
More years than you care to remember, Philip. Donkey's ears. Years and ears and ears.
Right. Love your show, and I'm always first to your defence on social media, so there we go.
Lord, that's a full-time job. Carry on.
Let me do it, yeah. Listen, I didn't listen to that interview with Donald Trump last night.
No, nor did I, but I picked up the gist of it.
Yeah, picked up the gist. The same old stuff, isn't it? He never changes. Yeah, let's get that one out of the way. Now, I voted Conservative all my life for my lesser evils.
Yes.
From the age of whatever until what I am now, 58 years of age.
Right.
I did vote to Remain.
Yes.
And I still hold that view. But I do think that Nigel Farage is actually putting a gun to Boris Johnson's head.
Yes.
But again, listening to you, has he got the numbers? Actually, James, I think he has, especially in the north of England.
He's got enough to hurt Johnson, possibly not as much as...
I really do think he has. Yeah, I mean, I do know a lot of lads up in the north, and they do all say the same thing.
If you've got a majority of 2,000, right?
Yeah.
And you're a Labour MP and the Tory is snapping at your heels, then the Brexit Party is a huge player in this deal, especially given that Labour no longer look like a Leave party. So these people who still want to leave that used to vote Labour, do we vote Tory or do we vote Brexit Party? They will find it a lot easier, oddly, to vote for the Brexit Party than they would for the Tories.
Exactly.
Limited. Brexit Party limited.
As the last caller said, this, for a couple of days at least, this election will be made as it's the election for Brexit. There are wider issues.
So what will Boris do then? Will he blink? I don't think he will. I don't see how he can. And I just called him Boris. I'm falling into all my own traps today. It's your fault.
You must be falling in love with him. I mean, I've got the same feelings about that man that you had. He's got the balls of a polecat, but there you go.
Nicely put.
It depends on how desperate the Conservatives are to hold on to power.
That's a good point, isn't it? And do you know what? I think Delphine in Brighton talking about narcissists, something else has just occurred to me. You've got two men here, Johnson and Farage, whose entire lives have been dedicated entirely to self-gratification. Everything they've ever done has been about themselves. They masquerade very effectively as caring about the country or caring about other people, but even a cursory glance at their CVs will reveal self-interest on a weapons-grade level that most of us can't even contemplate. So at one point, one of them has to crumble. And it could end up being both of them. Because they can't. You've got two completely self-interested individuals ostensibly pursuing the same goal, but they can't pursue the same goal because then the spoils will either be shared or they'll go to the other bloke. So Farage, do you think he'd rather remain in the European Union than watch Boris Johnson be the king of Brexit?
Do you know, in a perverse way, I think he actually would.
I do too now, but I could.
I really do. He's... I don't want to sound too derogatory, but he's a bit like a used car salesman, isn't he?
Yeah. That's nowhere near derogatory enough.
Well, no, it's not. And
some of my best friends are used car salesmen.
You know, he's a fellow presenter on your station who will bore you, unfortunately. But there we go.
That is the question then for the last half hour of the programme, Philip. Thank you for taking me so neatly up to the news. But would he rather actually remain and carry on being a Brexiter than watch Boris Johnson get this withdrawal agreement through Parliament, having secured a 5-year term as Prime Minister, been essentially banished to the boondocks, and retain his status as heckler-in-chief? What is the alternative? I mean, oddly, if Brexit happens in any way, shape or form, Farage is finished. Maybe that prospect is what has spooked him the most. I don't know. Thinking out loud, happy to be wrong. Happy to be right. But just a little intervention. Apologies if this is a little bit niche, but the journalist Isabel Hardman has just tweeted something about I can't really say journalist anymore. I wonder what the word is. I suppose we go with vile bigot, Rod Liddell, and his latest attack on Muslim people in the Spectator magazine. Isabel, I think, is deputy editor over there. She's just tweeted this. It's remarkable how rare this sort of courage and principle is in British journalism at the moment. I want to make clear that I profoundly disagree with and I'm hugely upset by Rod Liddell's piece. I have nothing to do with pieces that go into the magazine, other than the ones I write myself, but do not want anyone to think I somehow agree what he has said about Muslims voting, and I do not believe they are funny or worth writing. Similarly, I know personally just how strong and brave survivors of domestic abuse are, and Rosie Duffield is one of the finest among us. I will, because Liddell's article also heaped abuse on the domestic abuse survivor and MP Rosie Duffield. I will continue to do everything I can to improve the way domestic abuse victims are treated by our society and government, regardless of what other people write. I am grateful that The Spectator gives me the platform to do this, and I hope in time to convince others to agree with me too. Spectator, of course, a lot of jip being directed at the editor today, Fraser Nelson, over this disgusting piece that Rod Liddell has written. But, of course, organ grinders always more important in these contexts. And the publisher of I'm going to go all Colin Rooney now. The publisher of The Spectator is, of course, the scrupulously impartial BBC presenter Andrew Neil. On the other hand, Naga Manchetti. 12:37 is the time. Shams is in Utrecht. Shams, what would you like to say?
Oh, well, I'm back in the city now.
Well, that was quick.
That was the last time I called in.
Oh, I see. I thought we'd had you on hold for long enough to get back from the Hook of Holland. I thought, we keep people on hold for quite a long time, but that would be a new record. What's on your mind, my friend?
Well, 55 minutes I have actually been on hold for this call.
I know.
You're very intelligent and erudite callers. I'm just here to provide the balance.
Go on.
Okay. I think Farage has played a very shrewd move. This is the opening gambit.
Don't sort the phone line out. You can't be kept hanging around for an hour and then not get to contribute because your phone line's gone funny. Try again. I don't know what happened then.
Can you hear me now?
That is a little better. Quickly.
Okay. Farage has played a very shrewd move. I think this is his opening gambit for the coalition with...
he hasn't got any MPs.
Well... But the fact is, it started a debate, and we know that our current Prime Minister would chew his own leg off in order to stay in power.
Yes.
We're spending too much time concentrating on what our opposition are doing. We should be concentrating on the tactics that we need to employ to counter this.
Yeah, we will, but today it's all about Trump and Farage and Johnson. It's not, it's just gravity. It's not an editorial decision. It's the matter of what's new and what isn't new.
James, I've been listening to you for 16 years,
I know,
friend.
mate, I know. Makes me old. Makes me feel old. You're famous. I won't tell people why, because I sense you get embarrassed when I tell that story.
Yeah, all right, let's not go there. But the fact is, we spend too much time looking at our own navels, gazing at what the opposition are likely to do. We need to come up with our own tactics. It's like playing football. Study your opposition, but you must have something in your...
Look, next week I'll do a phone-in about Labour, Lib Dem infighting and what they should be doing and Remain coalitions and all that kind of malarkey, but today we're doing this.
I think today is also very important that we do discuss it. I want you intellectual listeners to help me decide who am I going to vote for in the next election. How do I vote? How do I ensure, as a Remainer, that we limit the damage that Farage and Johnson can actually inflict on this country.
Well, I don't know, mate. You could just sit still and watch them inflict damage on each other. That's kind of why we're talking about what we're talking about today. But yeah, you're right. I think there's Joe Swinson, Labour, Owen Jones having a crack at Joe Swinson. That just doesn't seem to me to be a very obvious path towards a resolution with which Remainers could be happy. But briefly, why do you see this as a shrewd move by Farage?
This will get it into the conscious and in the psyche, like everything. It's that, as you say, the gaslighting, the initial foray.
But Johnson can't abandon his deal. The whole election is about the deal.
It may not even be about abandoning the deal. It will be about combining forces. The fact that if you get Farage and Johnson, then that does create a very powerful force for the Leavers. Listen, that's my concern.
Yeah, but they can't get into bed with. I'd love this. I think we're going to call it Delphine's overarching theory of Brexit, which is that once two narcissists are fighting over the same dinner, it can never end well, arguably for either of them. But Shams, thank you. Ainsley's in Gibraltar. Ainsley, first of all, may I apologise for the United Kingdom completely failing to properly cover the Gibraltese or the Gibraltarian situation during all of these Brexit shenanigans. You lot must feel a bit like people in Northern Ireland and Scotland have felt for the last 30 years.
Well, I think even less than Northern Ireland. That's at least been a news piece for the last
I take it back. Yeah, absolutely right. So my apologies.
The impacts. No, not at all. I was listening to what you were saying earlier about Farage going through the looking glass and potentially not wanting Brexit to happen because it gives him relevance.
Yeah.
And maybe a couple of years ago, I completely disagree with you because I just wouldn't have believed it possible.
No, same here.
We've reached this weird situation where, Farage has gone from calling the Ben Act a surrender act to then criticising the EU because they're trying to override the Ben Act. He's gone from wanting
that's right. He did, didn't he? That was quite sweet, actually.
He's gone from wanting Brexit done immediately to calling for an extension.
He's gone from promoting the Norway-Switzerland option to claiming that he wanted to leave with no deal all along. I suspect today he's probably started trying to resurrect the Article 24 guff because he's so desperate for material. But we are where we are.
He said we wanted a unified approach with Conservatives on the general election, and now he's saying that he's going to put someone in every seat or every part of the UK. He knows that Johnson can't abandon the deal, so he's asking for the impossible. So there's only one option left open to him, which is to stand against them. He's going to split the vote. He could potentially ruin the Brexit vote for them. It seems as though it's almost like become a self-emulating policy, and maybe that's what he wants deep down. Maybe it gives him relevance in the future rather than just becoming a man in a pub talking about how important he used to be.
Yes. Well, that is his fear, obviously, isn't it? Or even a man on the radio talking about how important he used to be. He earns a lot of money by being the voice against Brexit, and if it gets done, or if it gets abandoned, if it disappears, then he is a nobody, like he used to be. And, these little phone calls with Trump, I don't think he'd be on speed dial anymore. Well, who knows? They could end up living in the same retirement home in Florida. It's 12:43. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'm exactly the same as Ainsley. If you told me a couple of years ago, I'd say I think Farage will end up wanting to remain in order to stay relevant and important. Is he going to get on Question Time ever again if we actually do leave under Boris Johnson's withdrawal agreement? Who is he? What does he... But, of course, who knows? Who knows? Fergal's in Putney. Fergal, what would you like to say?
Hi, how you doing? I listened to the interview last night, and two things that really struck me is Trump wants to break up Europe. It's crystal clear, and supporting Johnson and Farage is the best thing he could do.
I'd go further. I'd say Putin wants to break up Trump and wants to break up Europe, and Trump is his proxy.
They're working hand in hand. But the other thing that really struck me that nobody's mentioned is that Trump once mentioned the environment in this whole speech yesterday, and that was about Prince Charles. This is a guy who's pulling the US out of the climate agreement. He's pro-oil and gas. Farage, he's got nothing on the environment, and Johnson is just as bad. So the three of them together is going to be the breakup of Europe.
But how do you see them? Because I think that this is a split. I think Trump, oddly, and we kind of happened upon this before Farage's intervention today, he'd driven a wedge between them because of his criticism of the withdrawal agreement, which I don't currently see how Johnson can abandon that withdrawal agreement, and I don't really think Farage expects him to, which leads us back to the what's he up to question, and the answer to that is doing whatever he has to do to stay on the telly.
He's Trump's a negotiator, so he's throwing the spanner in the works. He's going, yeah, it's good, but he's putting a question mark.
Oh, okay. No, I hadn't thought of that. And of course, you know, this thing I've got here, the United States, United Kingdom negotiations, the summary of specific negotiating objectives, published by Donald Trump's own office, makes a mockery of some of the stuff he said last night. If only the interviewer had done a bit of research, we could have made some real progress there. But as you point out, that's a starting position. It's not it might well be an objective, but some objectives will be surrendered.
Yeah, he chops and changes everything he says. So
still, in the context of British politics, what will Johnson do? Will he accept Nigel Farage's offer, or will he reject it? If he rejects it, his likelihood of winning an election diminishes. Not completely, but it diminishes. If he accepts it, then he's called an election on the back of a deal that he's abandoned before a vote has been cast. So there's no good look here for him, is there?
There's no good look. This is an election that nobody's wanted, you know, and it's been forced upon us, you know, and the knives are getting.
It is. I mean, it is just a mess, and as ever with Brexit, the reason why it's a mess is that Brexit was a really stupid thing to do, and all of the people that told you to do it are not prepared, or not all of them, but most of the people who told you it was going to be brilliant are not prepared to admit yet that they made a terrible boo-boo. So you end up now in a situation where the two most prominent Brexiters in the country, Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage, are apparently at loggerheads over what Brexit actually is. Even having predicted this moment for 3.5 years, I still can't quite believe we've ended up here. Now they're arguing. I told you 6 months ago to start the clock until Farage started accusing Boris Johnson of not being sufficiently Brexity. Even Keith is nodding. Poor fella has to listen to every syllable I utter. I told you that would happen, and you didn't believe me. But because it has to happen. It's the only way he stays relevant. So no one is Brexity enough, because Brexit is stupid. And the minute you write down what your Brexit actually is, it falls apart. The only way you keep it afloat is by never writing it down. Theresa May discovered this at Chequers. Boris Johnson has discovered this now in the House of Commons. He came a lot closer than Theresa May did to postponing reality, but it would only ever be a postponement, never a cancellation. And now you've got Boris Johnson, who led Vote Leave, and Nigel Farage, who led Leave EU, disagreeing about what Brexit is. And yet the subtext and the backdrop, look what we've done to our wonderful country, honestly, because the backdrop to all of this is the continuing claim by people in my profession, as much as in politics, that 17.4 million people all knew exactly what they were voting for, and it was exactly the same thing. But Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage can't agree on what 17.4 million people voted for. Do you see it yet? Is it clear now? Has the penny dropped? What is going on, eh? What a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. I said a while ago that the Brexiter position in the forthcoming election would be simply built upon who you prefer being lied to, Nigel Farage or Boris Johnson. And here we are. I can't see currently how on earth Johnson capitulates to Farage. He had to capitulate to the EU. The EU's really powerful. They hold all the cards. So he had to go back to the original offer they made with regard to the customs border in the Irish Sea in order to save any sort of face after promising that he'd get a result. He got away with the U-turn, he got away with the climb down, he got away with proroguing Parliament unlawfully, he got away with misleading the Queen. This is what he does. He gets away with stuff, and eventually he'll be found out, but I wouldn't put money on when. So then what happens? Farage puts up candidates who have, after all, paid him £100 for the privilege of standing for the Brexit Party Limited. Actually, that's not fair. Lots of people who didn't actually get selected to stand as candidates paid him £100 as well. What does that do to the Tories? Well, it does bite into their victory hopes in various constituencies, but it hits Labour as well. And then, I mean, should you even be allowed to do stuff like that? To make this kind of... is it pork barrel trading? I've got that phrase somewhere in the back of my mind. I don't know. But should you be allowed to do this sort of horse trading? Where you say, we will seek to influence... I mean, you stand in as many constituencies as you can, or you stand in none, I would have thought, if you're a national party. But anyway, that clearly is allowed. I just wonder whether it should be. Because it's supposed to be hitting Labour, but clearly... What would a Brexiter do? Does a Brexiter still like Farage, or does a Brexiter like Johnson? And you can't now like both of them. That's a really interesting development. Matt's in Ashstead. Matt, three more calls, then it's the weekend. Carry on.
Hello, James. Yeah, so I think in this case, all roads with Farage and Trump and Bannon and that lot lead back to no deal. And so really what...
Right, again, ask yourself, what would Vladimir Putin want? And then the answer would be, yeah.
Exactly, and the only Brexit where Farage wins now is the no deal. That is, or as you say, he doesn't want Brexit to end. I mean, he's kind of like the marathon runner that's retiring at the end of the race, and as the line gets closer...
It slows down.
He wants it to get further away. He's panicking, because that's the end of that. Unless he gets the no deal. So Trump chiming in and criticising Boris Johnson's deal is basically saying, you know, you've got to have a no deal, and Farage is asking Boris Johnson to stand really on a no deal ticket, which
he can't
could be.
I mean, they've read the documents. I know he's got, you know, a Mark Francois or a Brexit hardman Steve Baker, but these people have read the documents. Even the ones that are currently sort of falling into line behind him, like Sajid Javid. They couldn't, could they, sacrifice the country's welfare upon the altar of their own career? Oh.
Well, as you say, I think that the more Johnson has looked at it, and, you know, the people behind him and his family will be saying the only way that you can come out of this now with any kind of, with your reputation intact, is to get some kind of deal and save the country from a no deal. After backing Brexit, you know, from being a Remainer, which he was, and then back to horse, which he didn't want to win. So basically, Donald Trump is turning around and saying, look, you know, don't back this deal. This deal's useless.
He's fomenting instability, isn't he? He's fomenting instability in any territory that is a threat to Russia, including America. He's fomented instability in America. The trade deal, the wars with China, bad news for America, great news for Russia. I mean, it is just so clottingly predictable, which makes Dominic Grieve's intervention yesterday that Johnson is currently sitting on a report into Russian interference in our elections all the more interesting. We'll have time to talk about that next week. So, briefly, what do you think Johnson will do?
Well, he has to stand behind his deal. But his deal, at the end, also, don't forget that it has the caveat, after he's tried to get a trade deal with Europe at the end, he can still take us out on a no deal.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I think ultimately it leads to the Brexit party trying to win as many seats as they can, whether it cuts the Tories' throats or not. It won't matter, because they're going to try and go for a coalition at the end of this.
Because, well, are they though? I mean, when they've got seats, yeah, I suppose so. I mean, this is such a fascinating election. I just wish it was happening in someone else's country.
I mean, the only way that Farage keeps in the game is to get in a coalition with Boris Johnson and the Tories, which they'll say that they're not going to do because they don't want to be seen to be backing a no deal, which is ultimately all Farage wants.
Yeah, and you know, the one area, and I'm incorrigible, has as ever been bombarding me with helpful contributions. This is the one area that gets overlooked. The thing is, he writes, that Johnson's Brexit deal isn't actually that much different to no deal. It's the hardest of hard Brexits. It is, but it's written down. Once it's written down, it's impossible to defend it as being superior to being in the European Union, which is why no one's bothered to try. But, of course, it is now written down, which means that Farage can find things in it he doesn't like, while not actually offering a written-down deal of his own by way of an alternative. Because the minute you write it down, come on, class, the minute you write it down, it falls apart, sir. Thank you very much. David is in Brighton with the last word of the week before we hand over the baton of chat to Sheila Fogarty. David, what would you like to say?
Thanks, James. I really like that analogy your last caller made about Nigel Farage as a marathon runner, his last marathon coming to the tape, and he hates the idea this is him out of the game. He just wants the tape to go further and further away. Anyway, the reason why I called, I think it was your previous caller talking about this is more about America. I'm talking now about Trump and his call yesterday. This is about America and the EU rather than Brexit. We're in danger of a bit of navel gazing here.
Yes.
If you could summarise Trump up in 2 words, it's America first, and the biggest competitor as a trading bloc is Europe, which is bigger.
Yeah, so make Europe weaker. I disagree with you about that. I think I'd put Russia there, not America, but because he's happy to harm America's commercial interests. There's great research into the impact that his policies have had on farmers, and indeed that his tax cuts have had on people as well. But it doesn't matter. This is a rhetorical disagreement.
I take your point. I mean, if you heard his speech, the interview yesterday, if you heard the whole thing, he made a big point of talking about America being far bigger than China as the global economic greatest power.
Right.
And he knows that Europe is bigger. Without Britain, it would be smaller. Anyway, point I wanted to make.
Well, we're out of time, actually. I think you've made it. You made it really well.
All right.
Be kind to yourself, David. Give yourself a break. That was a really good point. I had Sheila Fogarty chuckling away in the background. As if
You know why? Every time I hear the word China in a conversation about Donald Trump, China.
Yeah, my girls tell me off for that.
China.
Carry on.
Thank you very much indeed.